If you say so, Burke said before sighing as he looked at his watch. Okay, thanks. Truly. That does make me feel a little better about all this. But I reckon it's almost time. You'll be standing right there next to me, yeah? Of course. As you were told before arrival, if you need a break, just pass me the notes and I'll do my best, Bren responded. No one's forcing you to do this. It may be a little late, but we could even make you do this from a remote location through a machine, if you don't want to. No. If I'm going to be teaching them my species biology, then they should see a human in the flesh. It'll help them get a better sense of scale, Burke interjected. I may be nervous out of my mind, but one must do things properly. And suddenly, I have much more respect for you, Bren chuckled before pressing a button that flashed a huge screen across the wall. Now, as you humans say, a phrase that I have become very fond of, it's showtime. Yeah. And let's just hope we do something that's worthy of applause, Burke mused before the grip on his notebook tightened and he walked out into the open. Instantly, he could feel a couple hundred stares pointed his way from a veritable rainbow of horizons and unblinking eyes. But the professor had done countless presentations before, so that was something he could deal with. Even the dozens of different species sitting down drew his own gaze for no more than a second. And, taking a deep breath, the professor walked over to the podium and cleared his throat. Greetings. He spoke into his microphone, which immediately emitted a high-pitched screeching noise that echoed across the room. He leaned back and nervously glanced at Bren, who merely gave him a warm smile and the best keep-going gesture his claws would create. Burke nodded and then looked forward again, recalling the early words of, "They've seen it all." Greetings, he repeated. My name is Professor Burke, and I am here today as a representative of the scientific community of humanity. As you all know, I will be teaching you all about my species' history, biology, and all other vital info that will prepare your galactic community for our integration. Burke then looked behind him at the screencast on the wall and snatched up a small clicker from his pocket, praying that it would work as intended. And thankfully, things went right for once when it came to his presentations, as the previously white screen blinked away and was replaced by an archaic slide that simply said, "Humanity. What you need to know." The professor couldn't help but smirk as he let the crowd take this in, finding it very amusing that this presentation, which was arguably the most important in all of human history, was being done with a several hundred-year-old program that was apparently called PowerPoint. Burke had scoffed when he first saw examples of it provided by his superiors. But they claimed that, old as it was, this method was effectively simplistic and would be the best way of providing the crowd with an easy and understandable way of learning more about humanity. He could merely pause at each slide to let them absorb the information on it before switching to the next to explain more. Burke still wasn't a fan even after this explanation, as he preferred lecture-based sessions rather than ones focused on images. But his superiors had said otherwise, and so this is where he was now. The man had spent the last 6 days creating over 400 slides, jam-packed with everything he could think of, and now was the time to show it off. So then, let us begin, he said, clicking to the next slide, which displayed an image of an early human map and numerous facts. Humanity's history begins over an estimated 200,000 of our years ago, when our first ancestors emerged in the continent we call Africa. We evolved from primates and a human-like species called the Homo erectus, which I will show you, and from this point on, Burke barely paid attention to what he was saying, his brain running fully on autopilot, as he blabbed out explanation after explanation, and perfectly recited the hours-long speech he had been practicing. To anyone other than a scientist, researcher, or general lover of knowledge, the whole thing would be unimaginably boring, and they would probably doze off after 10 minutes or so. But this room contained only people who were here solely to learn. And Burke couldn't help but feel proud when he noticed that he had everyone's attention from how intently they were focusing on the screen. Still though, from that point forward, he barely concentrated on his lecture, his subconscious taking over as he retreated into his head. Okay, so far so good, he thought, briefly examining the crowd to gauge everyone's reactions. They're all taking notes, Bren is nodding along, and I'm pretty sure I haven't stuttered even. No, don't even think about it. Just keep going. We're only 20 minutes in, and there's still a lot more to get through. Which Burke did, with all the enthusiasm of a possum playing dead, his tone a blank slate as he explained fact after fact. But as jejune as this was to listen to, the man did excellently in getting the point across. And an hour later, he had given a brief but clear description of all of human history, up to the point of him standing there. And the professor took a moment to pause and compose himself. And that does it for humanity and how we have interacted with each other and more recently, the greater galactic community. Now, are there any questions before we continue? Burke asked, once again scanning the crowd. As he expected, not a single person raised their hand, only looking over their notes and patiently waiting for the human to continue. He glanced over at Bren, who simply mouthed, "Good job," before motioning for him to keep going. Burke nodded and went to the next slide. The room presented with two huge words that simply spelled out, human biology. As the title explains, I will now go into how humans physically function compared to other species in the community I have been informed of. And at the end, we'll also compare and contrast differences between the animal species of Earth and humans. So on that note, let us proceed. Burke continued on with showing off two large see-through diagrams of both a male and female human body. Before the next slide clicked and presented a diagram of the head with each section of the brain labeled. He had decided earlier that the best method here would be a top-to-bottom presentation. And as he began rambling on about which part of the brain did what, he covertly scanned the audience again. As, while he wasn't worried about anything here, his levels of curiosity to how they would react were off the charts. Truthfully, he didn't know much of anything about alien biology, despite his previous claims, and the most he had to go off on was their external appearance. But he had made it this far, and the human was convinced he could wing that part. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.